Have fictional black presidents helped elect real black presidents? Yes, I meant that to be plural. There's a lot of talk about whether the country is ready for a black female president, and I just like the question because it supposes that we should take seriously the opinion of bigots. It's like, well, I'm not racist, but we do have to respect the opinion of racists. But at the same time, I know that if this country is ready now, it's because we have developed into being ready over decades. What has gotten us ready? One element for sure, popular culture. What's Richard Pryor got to do with it? That's me and my father. He loved Richard Pryor so much that I was really young the first time I saw a black president on TV. In the first episode of Pryor's short-lived 1977 NBC variety show, imagine Chappelle's show before Chappelle's show, there was a long, brilliant sketch where Pryor played the first black president. Pryor gave his portrayal some of the seriousness and sanctimoniousness that would eventually lead to the actual election of a black POTUS. But Pryor also gave us a healthy dose of the absurdity of the idea of a black president. All of the pop culture portrayals of POTUSes before Obama fall into one of two schools. Pryor touched on both of them. They all fit into either an Afro-surrealist perspective, which means they're playing off of the difficulty of believing that there would ever be a real POTUS, or they were hyper-normalized and realistic and suffused with Hollywood's habit of extending moral authority to certain black characters. But did Americans of all races need to see a POTUS to be able to normalize the concept in their minds before they could conceive of one actually being elected? Let me explore. When Pryor and his writing partner, the legendary comic Paul Mooney, wrote the POTUS sketch, they did it in an era when there was a sharp rise in big cities electing black mayors. In the early 70s, for the first time in history, there were black mayors elected in big cities like Atlanta, Detroit, DC, Cincinnati, and Los Angeles.
I don't know how you thank 3 million people, but if gratitude were gold, I tell you that this would be a city of millionaires today.
Widespread success in the ballot box in big cities had some thinking maybe more was possible. Was the presidency a possibility someday? P-Funk's 1975 song Chocolate City took that dream and imagined a White House with Muhammad Ali in the Oval. But things went to another level when we saw Pryor in the White House briefing room taking questions. At first, Pryor played it serious.
The neutron bomb is a hold-cost weapon. It is not in the cellular realm of reality. We're trying to hold it in place, and it's a neo-pacifist weapon.
I think the character's sanctimoniousness, his competence, his intelligence, and his chill are all funny to the audience because they're unexpected. Like, wow, the POTUS is on top of his job. That's so funny. The scene, which someone who was in it told me was done in one take, flows into a different vibe as the conference goes on. A Karen-ish reporter from the Christian Women's News asks the president, a single man, about his dating life.
Mr. President, since you've become president, you've been seen and photographed on the arms of white women. Quite frankly, sir, you've been courting an awful lot of white women. Will this continue?
As long as I can keep it up.
Pryor really taps into something deep there. So often the racist fear of black success is that we'll ultimately use that power to date and marry white women. Pryor was always unafraid to say things that would cut deep. But where the beginning of the sketch was draped in Pryor playing the POTUS seriously, at the end we dive squarely into the Afro-surrealism of it all. Afro-surrealism is entirely different than surrealism, where the surrealism of, say, Salvador Dali bends reality into unrecognizable forms and unleashes the unconscious mind. Afro-surrealism is art that speaks to how normal life for black people can often seem surreal, or how surreal artistic moments can evoke black reality. We see Afro-surrealism in art like Get Out, Atlanta, American Fiction, Toni Morrison's Beloved, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, the great show Random Acts of Flyness, and of course, Sorry to Bother You.
Then read the script with the white boys.
Hey, Mr. Kramer, this is Langston from Regal View. I didn't catch you at the wrong time, did I?
So at the end of Pryor's Be POTUS sketch, we get into the Afro-surrealism of it all, when an untitled white Southern reporter mentions in a rude tone that the president's mother used to be a maid.
Now, your mother was a maid in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Now, after your tenure, if your mother goes back to being a maid, right? Will your mama do my house?
The question is a way of calling him the N-word. He's saying, no matter how high you get, even the presidency, I will still see you and your family as servants for me and whiteness. To me, you'll always be an N-word. Is it surreal that this would happen? Yes and no. If someone gets enough votes to become president, you would think that people would respect them, at least to their face. But when Obama was POTUS, stuff like this happened.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegal.
There wasn't a brawl after that, but the disrespect was real and surreal. I talked to Marsha Warfield, who was in the Pryor Show sketch.
Roberta Davies, Jet magazine.
She told me, I don't think the point of the sketch was to promote the idea of a black president, but to make a mockery of how absurd it would be in this society. So if black people thought that a Be POTUS was an absurd idea, the stuff of Afro-surrealism, surely it was beyond the imagination of most white people. So as soon as you bring up the idea of a Be POTUS, it's comical. That's what people thought of the concept of a Be POTUS back then. Chris Rock enters the chat. Decades later, in 2003, Chris Rock, who styles himself as a sort of political philosopher / comedian, got the chance to direct a film and wrote a comedy called Head of State, where he runs for the presidency.
We'd like you to run for president.
Of what?
The United States.
Of what?
Of America.
Get out of here.
Of course it's absurd, because many of us were still seeing that as a non-serious idea. No one would make a movie like this today, but at the time, it fit our notions around the ridiculousness of a Be POTUS. Rock plays Alderman Mays Gilliam, who's selected to run after the Democratic nominees for president and VP die in a plane crash. He's chosen precisely because the party thinks it can't win this time around, so why not toss in a black person who will excite voters of color because they are a growing demographic? The film says this explicitly. Rock, as director and creator, leans into the unlikeliness of Gilliam winning by having him campaign in tracksuits and a bus that's wrapped in branding pulled from the 1990s No Limit Records playbook. At a debate, when asked about how to deal with kids being on screens too often, Gilliam says,
How do we limit violent material? Turn it off. And if the kids cut it back on, knock them out.
What? The film fully embraces the absurdity of his campaign by having his black female advisor tell him,
You're here to lose, Mace. Arnott picked you so you could lose. Come on, Mace, just think about it. If they really had any idea that they could win this thing, do you think they would have chosen an ignorant-ass nigger like you?
She used the hard ER. That's what they thought of him. Of course, in the end, Gilliam wins because it's a Hollywood movie. But this is the sort of portrayal that would fit for anyone who thinks a Be POTUS is absurd. But other portrayals helped us start viewing things differently. Morgan Freeman could make you believe that God is black. When we're watching a film and we're really in the grip of it, like really enmeshed in it, like especially when you go to the movies or Maybe when you're at home and you're really focused on a show and you're not doing anything but watching. That's when the mind's eye kind of finds it hard to distinguish between the film and real life. You know it's a movie. You know they're actors, and yet you care about what happens so much that your body has physical reactions to what you're seeing. Your heart may race if it's romance. Your palms might sweat if it's horror. You react as if what you're seeing is real. In his new documentary, Hollywood Black, director Justin Simien argues whoever controls cinema controls history, because the stories and characters we see shape how we perceive the world. In a world where we are inundated with images of white male presidents decade after decade, the mind accepts the notion that white men should be president. The mind says, hey, when we think about presidents, the only images that come up are white men because that's all we've ever seen. We needed to see serious black presidents before we could truly conceive of that as something realistic. One of the films that may have made a difference by giving us a hyper-normalized B POTUS, thus normalizing the idea of a B POTUS as a realistic one in the American collective consciousness, was Morgan Freeman's President Tom Beck in 1998's Deep Impact. In this disaster film, there's two comets on a collision course for Earth, and if we can't stop them, billions will die and life as we know it will end. President Beck is not the central character, and the movie is not about making us think that a B POTUS is a real thing. But the president is a crucial character, and with the future of the world in serious doubt, he looks into the camera and he says,
So may the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord lift up his divine countenance upon you and give you peace.
He's a calming influence. He's the man in charge during an insane crisis, and we feel comforted and reassured by his leadership. He is competent, capable, cool, calm, and collected. This is the sort of emotional leadership we want from a president. Morgan Freeman, who always brings dignity and depth to his characters, imbues his B POTUS with a seriousness that says to us, yes, it would make sense to have that man in charge. But part of what Freeman is leaning on in that portrayal is something that goes back decades in Hollywood: the magical Negro. The magical Negro is a character who is black, wise, and there to help a younger white person who needs guidance. Think of the legend of Bagger of the Ants.
This is becoming embarrassing. Oh, no, sir. It's been embarrassing for quite some time now.
The magical Negro is imbued with a sense of moral authority, as if his or her blackness and their dignity in spite of oppression makes them a symbol of morality. They are supposed to be a deeply good person who is worthy of being listened to. They are the embodiment of wisdom, and they are there to save the white lead. Morgan Freeman's calming, soothing black president is perhaps a cousin of the magical Negro, because he's that wise, moral figure who's here to help everyone through a crisis. Seeing Freeman's president, it's like, oh yeah, that could work. A black president could work. Dennis Haysbert incepted America. A few years after Deep Impact came a hugely popular weekly TV show on Fox with a cool, calm, collected black president who many think did a lot of the work to open up the public's mind to the idea of a B POTUS. The show was 24. Dennis Haysbert played President David Palmer, and watching him now, he really does seem like Obama before Obama.
The most patriotic thing that we can all do today is to keep living our lives. So I urge you all, go back to work, go back to school, because the freedom we enjoy, the freedom that we earn every day, is the very thing that will defeat our enemies and keep us strong. God bless America.
Palmer was president for 3 seasons, from 2003 to 2005. And during those 3 seasons, over 10 million people watched every episode. That's a lot of people getting the image of a competent, trustworthy, seriously presidential black man beamed into their living room and into their minds once a week. I am sure that literally seeing that helped incept people into believing in the possibility of a black person as president. Because of Haysbert and 24, millions of people had seen it. Sadly, there isn't much of a record of black women POTUSes in popular culture. There was Alfre Woodard on State of Affairs.
Charleston, could we have killed Abdul Fattah today?
But that's a one-season show that few people watched. But I think once Obama broke the mental glass ceiling in the collective consciousness and showed us that the president doesn't have to be a white man, we could never turn back. Once the populace could conceive of a black president, they're ready for a black female president. If Palmer's fictional presidency made it easier for Obama to win, then Obama's win makes it easier for Kamala to win. And her win will make the road a little easier for someone else from a marginalized group that is considered unelectable right now, but one day, for sure, will win.